Great. So once again, welcome you all to today's section. Today we are going to look at for corporate governance. Everything about corporate governance, then you'll be fine. So let's see corporate governance. Good. So corporate governance. Everything to know about corporate governance. So first of all, let's look at what is corporate governance. The definition for corporate governance. Then what is it about? Corporate governance basically talks about how organizations are directed and controlled. So it's coming from the word directed or controlled. So it's the system in which, so system, right? Corporate governance just refers to system in which organizations are directed, directed and controlled. Yes, you can bring manage, but corporate governance is a bit different from you managing an entity. So we will look at a few different. Now, corporate governance move beyond just managing the entity. When you talk about management or managing an entity, you are just talking about the day-to-day activity, managing the day-to-day stuff. Good, managing the day-to-day stuff. But corporate governance going beyond that. So that's what we are going to look at for. So basically, so what will be the distinction between management and corporate governance? There's a difference, clear difference between these two terms. So you have to get it clear. Now, the corporate governance directive or instructions is in the hands of the directors. So the directors, they direct and control the organization. Usually the board of directors is in the hands of who? The board of directors. Then the management of the organization is also in the hands of what? The management team. So there are two people running the organization. The board is doing their part, which is not the day-to-day activity. And then the management team is also doing their part, which is the day-to-day activity. So now you see the clear distinction. So what the board does, it's what we refer to as what? Corporate governance. So corporate governance refers to systems in which the organization is being what? Controlled or directed from the top. So you realize that the board of directors have much power than the management team because the management team have to report to the board, go and answer questions about it. So basically, that is the difference between management and what? Corporate governance. Corporate governance go beyond just managing organization. Great. And then decisions that we normally take at the corporate level affect the entire organization. Good. So that is the corporate governance. The corporate governance. Then we look at the board, and then those that charge with governance, their respective functions, and then the role. Good. And basically, we look at the principles of good corporate governance. The principles of good corporate governance. Good. Now, shareholders form parts, play a role in the corporate governance. Normally, they sit on the board. They have a representative on the board. So they affect the controlling and the directing of the organization. Good. So their role is implement, appoint someone on their behalf on the board, such that that person will look after their interest. So if you're a shareholder, and then you can appoint members onto the board on your behalf so that that person look after your interest. If you are not on the board, then appoint someone that will look afterwards your interests. Good. Great. So now let's look at the principles of good corporate governance. So principles of good corporate governance. So in a good corporate governance, what are the evidence? What are the attributes? What do you see? What will be the driving factor, the force? What will be there before you realize that this organization is being controlled well, is being directed well? So you pick the very first one, we have what you call accountability. So the first principle on the list is what? Accountability. Good. So accountability. Accountability. It's a principle. So that's the first corporate governance principle. In fact, these principles, every body of corporate governance have their own. Yes. We have OECD. They brought a principle. So after this one, we'll look at some few of other principles. Also have the principle of what? Good corporate governance practice. Good. So now when you talk about accountability, what do you mean? Here we are saying that those charged in governance, who are those? Those charged in what? Governance, charged with the governance. Those that they have to direct. Those that are in charge of the corporate governance, they should render accountable, or they should be accountable to the people employ them. We are saying that it's the board of directors who are in charge of what? Governance. So this principle suggests that this board, they are what? They should be held accountable, or they should render accountability reports to who? The employer. So who employ the board of directors? Good, it's the shareholders. Thank you, the owners. So shareholders. Good. So the shareholders, they have to appoint members onto the board so that the board will look after their interests. All the shareholders will know they can be on the board. So appoint few members onto the board, then good. So those board of directors, this principle states that they are directly accountable to who? The shareholders. Because if someone have employed you, then you have to also report to the person regularly. So that's the first principle of good corporate governance. It says that the board of directors who are entrusted the directing and then the control of the organization in their hands. The board of directors, they control, they direct the organization. So they have to also discharge their accountability responsibility to the shareholders. So that's the first principle. Good. Now, let's dive further. What are they going to render account to? So the board, what are they going to talk about? So let's put some few points down. What they are going to render account. So first, they are going to talk about monitoring of the executive team or executive managers. So monitoring of what? The executive members or the executive managers. So this principle states that you have to discharge your duties to the shareholders in terms of monitoring. Good. And then any other principle stated in the laws and the regulation. So principle prescribed in the laws and regulation. So these are the systems in which the board of directors render an accountability role that of the shareholders. You know, owners have set up a business, but they are not managing it themselves. They are not controlling the business themselves. They have entrusted the control or the directing of the organization into the hands of who? What you call the board of directors. So agents number one, board of directors. Agent number 2. And then the board of directors to have employee management team, we call them executive management. We will look at this structure. Executive management. Good. So this one is being headed by the board chairman. Executive team headed by the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, or the MD. Good. So the board have also employed management team to also conduct the day-to-day activity, whilst they are also seeking for what? The directing. So it means that these people, they are a bit powerful. So powerful. Just that the raw powerful guys who the owners, because they employ the board, and then the board also employ the executive management. So it means that these people have an accountability role to render to whom? That of the owners. That is the point that we are talking about here. Good. So basically, that is it. Now let's move on to the next principle. Great. So the next principle that we will talk about it, aside accountability, will be what? Fairness. We are saying that the good corporate governance principles, there must be accountability. The board must be held responsible for the actions that they take. To who? Shareholders. That's what you are talking about. The board must be responsible for the actions that they take, decisions that they take. So if you come and then be on the board and then you act, use the word negligently, then you should be held liable to that of the shareholders. That is accountability. Whatever you do, render account to what? The owners. The next one is fairness. Oh yes, there must be fairness. Fairness. Fairness simple means the board must give equal opportunity to the shareholders. Equal opportunity to what? The shareholders about their rights. About their rights. They should allow the shareholders to exercise what? Their rights. Fairness. That is the fairness. Over here, if your boss have employed you, and now you are preventing your boss to come and then control you. Now you are now powerful than your boss. Good. Normally happens. It happens in the service industry. Yes. When you come to service industry, it's inevitable. Normally those that do the work, they are powerful than the boss. Take the legal team. Take legal team or firm of lawyers. The lawyers that they have employed by the owner, now they are the bosses. Yes, because they are the one that running the business. If they don't move, the business does not move. So they can detect. Good. So here we are saying that the board of directors must grant the shareholders adequate opportunities and also rights, and then their responsibilities. So that's what we are talking about here. Fairness. There must be fairness on the board in decision making, appointment, effectiveness. All these contribute to a good corporate governance principles. So, in simple quotes, in fairness, shareholders' rights must be protected and have to give equal opportunity to all the shareholders, no preference. Me, I was appointed by shareholder number A, so always I will go in favor of that person. If another shareholder, another group where I was not the one, they are not the one who appointed my enrollment or my involvement, I'll go against that shareholder. No. So that is it. So here we should protect the rights of the shareholders. Protect the rights of the shareholders. That's the fairness that we are talking about. Protect the rights of the shareholders and give them equal opportunity. Don't disadvantage any of the shareholders. And then likewise on the expense of the other or an advantage of the other person. So that's what we are talking about. Good. You can pick a question. Now, finally, over here to We can also say that give equal hearing to all the shareholders. Yes, to address or voice out their challenges. If any shareholder have a challenge, the system must allow all of them must provide a fair basis. Not that some of the shareholders they can come straight and come and then discuss their challenge with us. Other ones have to go through the system. Yes, no. Here we are saying that grant equal chance or equal opportunity to the shareholders for them to express their challenges or any issue that they have. That's the fairness that we're talking about. Good. Now let's move on to the next. So the next principle is what? Transparency. So good, transparency or transparent. Here we are saying that the board of directors they should provide timely and adequate report or information about the company. Transparency so that the owners they will not suggest or think that they don't have access to certain information or they have little information. Only the board and the management team are holding the information. The owners don't have. So here to avoid this, then this principle of what transparency suggests that as a board, make sure that timely, regularly furnish the owners with adequate information about what? About the activity of the organization. So that's why you prepare quarterly reports, monthly reports, yearly reports, annually, and then so on. You prepare reports and then issue them out. It should tell them what is going on. Other than that, if one person have more information than the other, then the fairness is not there. The fairness is not there. Two, the one that have more information will use it as a disadvantage of for the owner. Good. And this one will create what you call agency problem. Agency problem. So we will look at that. So that's the transparency. So we are saying that for transparency, make sure that the board provide what? Timely or regularly or routine adequate information or report about the activities of what? The organization. Basically, that is the transparency. Then we are done. I want to say it again. Great. Perfect. So this relates to the board. Yes, it relates to the board. The principles of good corporate governance is related to those charged with governance. So it's between the board and what? Who? The shareholders, the employers of what? The board of directors. So that is it. That's the principle of what? Good corporate governance. And then sometimes extending towards the organization. Good. So that is the principle. Great. Now with the transparency, it means that there must be what? Free access to information. Yes, the board, please do not block any shareholder when they try to request for information. Good. Good. So transparency simple means information must be shared freely to all the key stakeholders. Now the principle we extend it to other stakeholders, but the most key ones is the shareholder. That's why we always talk about them. About the three, all the three that we talk about it so far, it's relating to the shareholders because they are the, but they have the highest power when it comes to that of the corporate governance. They have power. Good. And the last principle that we'll talk about is the responsibility. responsibility. Is a responsibility. Good. So here we are saying that the entity must provide the interest or satisfy all the key stakeholders required by law. Anybody that your activity affects the key stakeholders, you have an obligation to satisfy that person. So that's why a customer can take you on to court. That's why a supplier can take you to court. Yes, because he's a stakeholder or a key stakeholder. So you are responsible to maintain its interest. So that's a responsibility. So responsibility principles suggest that the board or the company as a whole must provide the interest of all the key stakeholders, not only shareholders or not only the directors themselves. They should also care for the other people, provide for the other people. Good. So now we are done with that of the principles of good corporate governance. Good. Now we'll go to the system of the corporate governance, and then we look at it from that angle. So first, look at the structure. So from the shareholders to our board of directors, and then to what? Executive management. So these are the rules. So now we should know the functions of the shareholders, and then the functions of the board, the functions of the executive managers. Good. For these functions can be found in the last two sentences paper. So we look at that. Now we are going to look at for the functions of the shareholders, what they do. Now everybody knows shareholders, right? They are the ones that they secure shares, they've invested their money by way of purchasing shares in the company. We look at these three people, their role, their function, because there are three different things altogether. And there are people that charge with governance, especially the board of directors. They are the people that charge with what? Governance. Good. So we look at their role that they play. Then each of them. So please and please again, you should know the role played by all these three people. So let's start with the shareholders, their role. So then we go to board of directors in that order. Shareholders. I can ask you, who is a shareholder? Who is what? A shareholder. And then explain their functions or their role. Good. Good. Now, for shareholders, they are in there for approval. So most of their role is in the form of what? Approving documents, approving decisions. So what are the decisions that shareholders will approve? That is all. Shareholders, most of their job, their role is to approve certain decisions in the company. Because the company is for them, is a company, they are the owner. So certain decisions have to pass through their hands. What are they? That's all. So first one, we talk about what? Appointment of what? External auditors. So decisions that shareholders need to be approved. So decisions that shareholders need to be approved. Need to be approved. Decision number one, we will talk about appointment of what? External auditors. So number one, appointment of external auditors. Good. So appointment of external auditors. No shortcuts in exams. Number two, what about appointment of members onto the board? So shareholders, they have to appoint members onto the board. Before they will appoint you onto the board, shareholders have to what? Approve that. Shareholders have to approve your appointment onto the board. So that's the second role. Appointment of members onto the board, right? Good. So appoint So appointing of members, onto the what board, right? Good, onto the company board. So onto the board. That is it. Good. Then what are the other approval? Selling substantial assets. If you are going to sell substantial asset of the business, shareholders have to be approved, or shareholders need to be informed, and they will approve that. Yes, if you are going to sell what substantial assets, so the corporate assets. If you are selling all, in fact, not just one motor vehicle, shareholders have to approve. No, that's not what you're talking about. Substantial, like something of great value, something that when you sell, it's like, this company to affect the company. Shareholders need to be aware. Or if you are selling all the assets, so if you are selling all, so number 3, you can talk about selling all. So selling all or substantial, very great value. Shareholders need to what? Approve all these transactions. Good. So basically, these are the rules that shareholders, there are many. So we discuss the remaining part. Good.
Changing the corporate share capital.
Good. Okay, so to go over, first we say appointment of what? External auditors. Second, appointing members onto the board. 2, selling all or substantial assets of the company. Good. Selling all substantial what? Assets of the company. Shareholders have to approve that. Perfect.
So if you are asked the question, appointing the members on the board, at a point, can they say that they are too many, so they want to reduce it?
Now, shareholders have to approve reorganization or capital reduction scheme. Shareholders must approve. Capital reduction scheme or reorganization, amalgamation, mergers, acquisition. Shareholders must approve. So they have to approve decisions with regard to what? Reorganization, amalgamation, mergers, and acquisition. If the company want to go through capital reduction process, shareholders need to be informed and approved before the process can continue. So that's the point number 4. So that's the point number 4. Point number 4. So shareholders need to approve reorganization, amalgamation, mergers, and acquisition. Shareholders have to approve all this before taking into consideration. Now, shareholders have to also approve when the entity want to add a function, want to add another area of business or restrictions. They want to impose certain restrictions or remove restrictions on the business. Shareholders need to approve. Good. Shareholders need to approve all these decisions. Great. Shareholders need to approve all these decisions. Good. So take note of that. Now, changing the corporate share capital to need approval from the existing shareholders. So changing what? The corporate share capital. Either increasing it, reducing it, shareholders need to what? Approve. Good. Okay, so these are the few Functions of what? Shareholders in terms of approval. Good. In terms of approval. So that's the role that they perform. Now let's go to the board of directors. Who are the board of directors? So let's go to the board of directors. Now we are done with shareholders. Let's move straight to the board of directors. Okay, great. Now let's continue the game. With that of board of directors, what are their rules, their functions? Who are board of directors? Now, all listed companies require to have a board. Good. All listed companies you have required to have a what? Board of directors. Now, basically, the board of directors, they are there to control and direct the organization, and then report timely to what? The shareholders. And they're also there to provide the interest of what? The shareholder. Now, the role of the board of directors is combination of what? Decision making. They take decisions. While shareholders approve, they will take what? The decision. So you see the rule, right? Shareholders, the big boss, they have to approve. Board of directors have to make that critical decision, and then the shareholders have to approve. So if you take the board of directors, no shortcut to their role is in two. They only make decisions. So making of what? Of certain decisions or economic decisions. So making of decisions. They make decisions. So let's go straight forward. That is, they just make decisions. And then two, they also have monitoring role. Yes, monitor. So monitor the activity of the organization. So monitoring. So all the specific role that we are going to look at, the board of directors, they are in there to make decisions and to monitor whether things are done right. That's all. That's all we have board. Oversee, to check the activities of the executive management. So let's look at the specific functions of the board of directors. These two are the general functions of the board of directors. That the specific function that we are going to look at for, it will be the breakdown of this. Then we are done. So specifically, let's look at the first function of the board of directors. The first function of the board of directors. So here we are saying that with the board of directors, they determine the strategies for the corporate what body. So they give direction. So they set strategy. So set what? Strategy. Strategy and what? Direction. Wow. Direction. Is give a clear direction. Set strategy and give a what? Clear direction. Good. Good. That is one. Number two, they supervise and monitor the executive management. I like that. They do what? Supervision. They supervise and monitor. Monitoring is here. And monitor who? The executive management. Executive management. So the board of directors have to make sure that they supervise and monitor the executive management. Good. So that is it. That's the first and then the second specific rule. These ones are general rule. So when the examiner asks you what are the functions of the board of directors, tell the examiner, oh, for the board of directors, their rules in direction of making of decisions and monitoring of the executive board or the executive management. Now, below are the specific role performed by the board of directors. Good. Now, the board of directors design internal controls They design what? Internal control. The board of directors design the internal controls, and the management team put the internal control into actions. I like that. Have you seen the connection? It's the board that have to design the internal controls. Control over cash, control over this, control over assets, control of purchases, control over buying. It must be set by who? The board of directors. But who will carry this control is the management team. They carry it like an instruction, form of instructions. Good. So that's the third point. Setting of what? Internal control. Internal control. Good. Then we can also talk about supervise and the monitoring executive board. We can go ahead and then look at the remuneration packages for that of the executive management. Remuneration what? Packages for executive management. So it means that it is the board of directors that will determine the amount to be paid by who? The executive management. For instance, money to be paid by the finance director, finance manager. Yes, all their pay will be determined by who? The board. Yes, the board should determine the salary, the remuneration packages that we should be able to give to who? The executive members or the executive management team. Good. Now, the next one is through the audit committee, the board of directors challenge the quality of financial reporting of the organization. So point number 4, they challenge. I like that too. They do what? Challenge. They challenge the quality of what? Reporting or quality of financial reports. The quality of reporting in the organization. They challenge the quality of reporting in the organization. So that is the role. Great. So we said that the board challenge the quality of what? Financial reporting. Because when the financial statement is being prepared or the financial report is being prepared, it must send to the board for approval. So if you go and then the one prepares it, the management team have to go and answer certain questions for the quality purposes before finally it will be handed over to what? The auditors. Because if the board does not challenge the financial statement and go to the hands of the auditors and fraud or material else being detected, it will go against the board. Yes, because if the company sink, the board also sink together. The board will not be what? Stand out that, oh, it was the company who was managing, who was directing the company. Good. So that's why they have a role to challenge the quality of the report. Before any information come out from the company, the board must make sure that that information is what? Authentic. Is faithful represented. Good. Now, this one is a subset of one of the points that we've got already. Let's go to point 5. Point number 5, rule number 5 of board of directors. The board is responsible for assessing risks and designing and implementing of what? Risk controls. So they have to do what? First, assess risks. So assessment of risks. So first, assess risks. Responsible for assessing risks. So the board is what? Responsible for assessing risks facing the organization and designing after you assess that the way we keep cash our company of late is highly risky. In fact, one day somebody can just walk in, pick the safe or open the safe, whatever amount the hand hold, and run away with it. So now let's now design and implement control over the risks that we have identified. If we're a mining firm, you do have your risks. We call it what? The business risks. Good. If we're a bank, we do have risks, financial institution. If we're a trading company, you have risks. If we're farming, into farming, agric, risks. If we're a poultry farmer, uh, sometimes you be there and instead of fowl disease, oh, your fowl, Ugomba, this Xmas, you can get some to sell. Yes. So all this one is in the hands of the board. So then the board have to now be assessing. The way our ATM, there's no CCTV camera there. Try. Somebody can come and manipulate it for us. Yes. So let's fix CCTV camera there. Good. The way our ATM is too far from our security point, no, it's not safe. Let's get close to the security point. Assessing risks and implement it. Make sure that the ATM has moved from where it was to the security point. You have implemented it. Not just assessing that, people can just come in and then walk straight to the security to the ATM and then withdraw any amount or like forge. No. If you assess it, you should be able to what? Design goes to ways to mitigate such risks. The board of directors too can also determine the risk appetite for the company. Yes, the amount of risks that they can what? Accumulate. Certain risks you can't accumulate. No, it's over you. In fact, it's over you. Certain risks you can't accumulate. Looking at our capacity, look at what you have. Can we accommodate certain type of risks? Maybe one day your board has made a decision that all your money they should use it to go and then trade in forest trading. Try. What if all this money, let's say about 30% of your reserves, they are going to use it to trade in the forex? 30% of your reserve or 30% of your cash, they are going to use to trade in what? The stock market, or even let's say the treasury. No, the forex market. Yeah, the risk is we can lose everything up and down. In fact, you can gain, boom. You can also lose everything, boom. So if you're going to invest all your egg in one basket, and unfortunately for you, all of them crash. If you have other eggs around, you will even feel it too. You will even feel it. Have you seen when you have a lot of cash, over 50,000 going, even when your 50 Ghana cedis fell down, 100 Ghana cedis fell down, you don't even feel it. But when you spend all your money, finish, when your 1 CD fall down in the broad daylight, you won't touch light to look for it. Because at that time, you cannot accommodate that loss of 1 Ghana CD. Meanwhile, you could have accommodated what? Loss of 100 Ghana cedis when you have over 50,000 cedis. So at any point in time, we have the risk that the company can do what? Accommodate and our appetite. Good. So it is what? All for the board of directors. They should make that decision. Good. Now the same risks. Point number 6. Now, the board have to monitor the effectiveness of the risk controls and keeping them under what? Review. So that means when it talks about risks there are about 3 to 4 points under risks. We said the board is responsible for what? Monitoring the effectiveness of what? The risk control the controls that you put in place to mitigate the risks, are they effective? Monitor and see whether they are effective. Good. And keeping them or keeping risks under review. So review the risks and see whether, in fact, you are making what? A headway. That is it. Okay. So we've given 6.6. And then I'll give the last point. Then move on to management. Management. I'll give the last point. And then we go to management. Then we come and take the board and talk about it into detail because we have to talk more about the board. The last point that I'll give, which will be the role or the function of the board of directors, is to report to shareholders on its review of internal control. They have to report to shareholders on its review on internal control. So number 6, but is the number 7. Report to shareholders. So report to shareholders on its review of internal control. They have to go and tell shareholders the state of the internal control, whether the internal control they have is adequate or they are in the process of developing adequate ones. Good. For this one, if I don't say it, I'll not be happy. Assessing the compliance level of the corporate body. That's the last function. So that's making 8, right? Assessing what? The compliance level of the corporate body. So are they complying with laws enacted by the government and other agencies? Are they coping with the local laws, especially?
Assessing compliance level.
Assessing the compliance level of corporate body. Assessing the compliance level of corporate body. Especially the foreign companies trading in the country, are they obeying or comply with the local laws, or they brought their own foreign laws? So the board have to make sure that compliance it's at the highest. Good. So that's why with a financial institution we have what? Head of what? Compliance. It's a very critical section. Make sure that you comply with all laws and regulations, locally, internationally, that cover our business. You have to comply with it. Good. Now let's go to management. Then we come back to the board in detail. Management. So let's quickly look at the roles or the functions of. Great. So management team. What are their roles in respect of corporate governance, management? What's their function? Now, for management team, in fact, they take the day-to-day decisions. The day-to-day, they manage the business. You say locally, right? Yes. Good. So day-to-day activity. So specifically, the first role or the function is to carry the instructions, the policies, and the controls set up by who? The board. So that's the first function or the role performed by who? The management team to what? To carry out, to make sure that the objective of the board will come into pass. So that is it. So management will implement. So implementation. So management have to implement or the implementation of policies and what? Decisions taken by the board of directors. Decision taken by the board of directors. So the board. Good. So that's the first function of the management team. They have to take or carry the message that the board of directors have for the organization. They have to now carry it and then like implement it and make sure that it's being adhered to. Good. Now, with the management team, they also make decisions with the type of product, market that the company must deal in. So the type of product the company must produce. Management make decisions towards that. So management have to decide which products they will go in for. And then the other section. So the product that the organization should pursue. So products that organization should produce. Products and what? Services that the organization have to pursue. Have to pursue. So that's it's a management role. Yeah, basically you can also looking at review of what internal controls. Review of internal controls. They also review internal controls. Yes. For instance, internal auditors or the internal audit function is part of the management. Good. And then they review the internal control, whether it's in the position working well. Now, this point, so that's the point 3, review of the internal control. I'm going to point 4. The point 4 is very important. Management is responsible for prevention and detection of what? Fraud. Prevention and what? Detection of what? Fraud. Is a management responsibility. So management is responsible to determine what? Or to detect fraud and prevent fraud. Yes. This is not the main duty of an external auditors. No. It's the management team who are responsible for detection and prevention of fraud. So that's the 5th point that we look at it. Good. So basically, that is it. Now, we will come to the board. Let's dive a bit detail to the board. The remaining points are in the handout, the one that posted on the platform. All the roles are stipulated, there are many of them. Good. Now, the management team, who is their head? So we can also pick some key management team and then they ask for their function. Management team is headed by who? All the management team, they are officers. They are officers. Whether they are called themselves managers or directors, once you form part of the management team, you're officer. Good. And then their boss is who? The CEO, the chief executive officer. So the CEO head the management team. Good.
You don't see what about MD.
The CEO or the MD. So the CEO or the MD head the executive team. So he's the head of the entire executive board management. Good. So that is it. We should know their responsibilities, their function of CEO or the MD. Function of the MD or the CEO. He's the head of what? Good. He is responsible to answer questions queried on the board meeting. So he will be queried or he will report to the board on the performance of the company regularly. So they want anybody to like defend the company is the what? The CEO who carry the company's performance at the board meeting, at the board level. So that's the basic function of the what? The CEO. He is the head of the executive management. Good. And then we also have internal auditors. Internal auditors. They also form part of the management. These two guys are a bit powerful. Yes, so you should know their functions or their role that they perform. Especially the internal audit has been stated nicely in the manual. So when you get it and then good. Now internal audit, they in fact I sometimes call them the executive audit committee. They review the risks facing the organization. Yes, they also review the risks facing the organization. And then they implement the internal controls set by the board of directors or the management team. So they carry the mandates or the instructions of the audit committee. Good. So that is it. So basically, internal audits function, and then they also enforce the implementation of the internal controls. We've talked about that one too. Now, internal auditors, in fact, they prevent and detect fraud. We said that it's the responsibility of the management team to detect what and prevent fraud. Internal auditors are part of the management team. They are responsible for that. They are in the executive management. So they are make sure that controls are working perfectly. If controls are not working, they report back to who? Those who set the control. And then they can also make recommendation to the board and to the management. Oh, I suspect that we should have a second key. I suspect that one person should not have access to our cash. Or I suspect that one person should have access. We should separate them. And then two people have to sign before cash move from the organization. Basically, that is what we talk about. Okay. So that is the function of the internal audit. So they carry what management team, the objective of management team, they move it into what reality. Good. And then they report to who? The audit committee of the board. They report to the audit committee. They report to the audit committee on the board. But in terms of management level, they report to who? That's the CEO. Good. So that is it. Now I can go and then look at my board. I can go and look at my what? My board. The board. The board. Look at the functions. There are two types of directors on the board. Two main directors. There are so many directors, but we are going to look at two. Executive directors and what? Non-executive directors. So who are they? So executive director and what? Non-executive director. So now the executive directors, these are directors who are on the board and also play a management role. So they have a two functions. They're on the company's board at the same time play or form part of the management team. So for instance, the internal auditor. If the internal auditor is on the board, then such a person is what? Is an executive member or executive director. So let's say finance director, number one. Finance director. The CEO or the MD. Yes, you go on the board. The CEO and then the MD. Good. So these are the two people. Now, non-executive directors, they are the directors that are not or that do not take active management of the organization. That's the day-to-day running. They are the outsiders. You can see people that on the company board which are not working within the organization. They are called what? Non-executive directors. Good. And then we need them. So if you take a typical board, they comprise of these executive and what? Non-executive directors.
Non-executive, they do not take active work.
The non-executive, they don't take part in the management, day-to-day running of the organization. They only come when there was a board meeting or when there's a issues that they have to resolve. That is the end. Unlike the finance director who report every day, non-executive directors do not report every day. They have their functions. We look at their functions too. The functions of non-executive directors. The functions of who? Non-executive directors. They have their own functions. Good. So we look at them. Their functions are a big three: risk, challenge, and then reward. Good. So their functions are a bit three: risk. They also assess the risks. And then two, monitor and challenge or supervise the executive directors. They monitor, supervise, and challenge what the executive directors. Then three, you can also talk about reward. Yes, they design the reward packages for who? The executive directors. So the non-executive directors will determine the pay of executive director. Good. So that is it. We'll talk about the functions, risks, and then monitoring, and then the reward. Okay. Now, let's see. Let's see. The composition of a board varies from company to company, depending on what? Your size. However, we have the minimum quota. Good. Okay, great. Okay, let's go over the executive and non-executive directors. Executive directors, they are the directors that what? They are the directors that are on their board at the same time take the day-to-day activities or partake in the management of the business. So he's a manager at the same time a board member. For the same company, you are called executive director. You are who? A board member at the same time a director of a company at the same time you're on the board. So you are executive member or executive director. But if you're a director of the board or a member of the board, but you don't hold any position in the company, you don't report functionally in the company, don't report daily on the company, you are what? Non-executive directors. You are a non-executive director. So if you don't report to the company, but you only come around when there's a board meeting and then other needs are right, then that's the non-executive. And we said that the non-executive challenge the executive, they supervise the executive. Yes, because if you are part of them, you can't supervise them all. An outsider can do the supervision very well than an insider. So those are not within. They can come around, come and supervise us, those within, and see whether they are doing what will contribute to achieve the objective of the organization. Okay. So basically, that is the difference. Then we went ahead and we said that the rules of who? The executive, sorry, the non-executive directors. We said that risks. They assess risks facing the organization and then design controls to mitigate such risks. And we said, okay, they also challenge, monitor, and supervise the executive management. And we say they also design the remuneration packages. They also design what? The remuneration packages for the executive members. Good. So these are the functions of the non-executive directors. So now we know the non-executive directors. Yes, their role or the function that they play in the organization. Okay, good. Now let's go on to that of the board of directors, and then their composition, and then the committees under the board of directors. Good. Now, the size of the board should reflect the industry knowledge about the company. So, the board size is often depend on the capacity or the size of the organization. Ideally, the larger the organization, the larger the number of people on the board. So, if you are operating a small scale business, you need a board. So traders, do they have a board? No, we are talking about company where they have a lot of business activities. Good. So the board size, we don't have a precise board size. You should have 10, 5, 15. No. You say they cut it according to your size or your capacity, your stature, or your capacity. Just that the minimum must be 4. Minimum must be what? 4. Good. This minimum is as a result of certain good corporate governance principle. So minimum of 4 on the board. Not 4 on the board. And majority should be non-executive. If it's a financial institution, it must be a bank. It must be a Ghanaians. For a bank, good. So perfect. Now, let's look at the committees under the board and their respective functions. Committees that we should have under the board. Once you are a listed company, you should have a board. And then the board must be headed by a chairman, in which, if it's a listed company, the chairman should not be, or the chairman, and then the CEO should not held by what? The same person, the same individual. Especially for bank, whether listed or not, our corporate governance principle does not allow the CEO or the MD, and then the CEO, and then the chairman of the board or the chairperson is in the same individual. No. Why is it like that? So why is it that the CEO's role and then the board chairman's role must be performed by who? Individuals. One, to prevent unaffected power. If you now ask the board chairperson or the chairman, and then that of the CEO in the same person, it means that that person cannot be what? Cannot be queried. He head the board, at the same time head what? That the executive management team. So that person, if the person is making mistakes, no one checks on the person. But if they are in different hands, at least when one person makes mistakes, the other person will be there to correct, because they are two tough people. And these two positions, please, this one is for what? listed company and unlisted bank. For a bank, the chairman of the board and then the CEO of the management team should be a different person, an unlisted company. So for a financial institution in Ghana versus what? Listed company. Aside this, you can have, so if you see a private company, unlisted company, the chairman can be what? The CEO. There's nothing wrong with it because it is not a financial institution or a listed company. I can give you a critical example in Ghana. If you take Indum, Indum Group, yes. Okay, great. We're about to look at the committees that we have under the board. But the head of the board, we've chipped in the head of the board. We are saying that the person who should head the board is the chairperson, is the head. The person who should head the management team is what? The CEO. And these two positions should not be held by the same person or one individual. Why are we saying that? We are saying this because that person will have unaffected power. Nobody can query that person. Nobody. But here we say we have a limit. If it's a financial institution or listed company, that's where that rule applies. But if the company is unlisted, oh, the CEO can be the chairman of what? The board. Good. We'll look at the committees after this, after chipping it, because committee is the last one that we will do. Good. So I was giving you a critical example, Group Indum. Before he resigned as a chairman, Papa Indum was the chairman of the board, at the same time, the CEO. Good. So that is it. Now, I'm giving a trial work. We should know the roles of the chairperson or the chairman of the board.
Can they be separately?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. Good. All of them take different salary. So the other people who have the same person being the head of the management team, that's the CEO, at the same time, chairman over here, and they are saying because they don't want to pay different money to different people, you can just give it to one person and then we move on. But for listed company, no. Financial institution, no. Shouldn't do that. Good. So that is it. Now I need the functions of these people. We've looked at the CEO. I think we've come across CEO. Let's with the chairperson or chairman. Chairman's function. In fact, he prepares the meeting for the board. He gives policies, instructions, the agenda, set agenda for every meeting. That's the chairman. Good. So I've given you some. Please complete it for me. Now let me go to the game of the day. The committees under the board. Let's go to the committees under the board. What are the various committees that we have under the board? The various committees that we have under the board. Number one, we have audit committee. Audit committee. Audit committee. So that's the first committee that we have. Good. Audit committee. Audit committee. So committees of the board. Number one, audit committee. Number two, the remuneration committee. Remuneration committee. Number three, nomination. They are different. Remuneration and nomination. Then number 4, risk management team. The risk management. So every board should have these committees under them. So that's why if you have a limited number, you can't have all these committees. If you have a limited number, you can't have all these committees. So let's look at the composition. Each of them, you should know their composition and then their function. That's all. Composition and their function. Composition and their function. Composition and their function. Good. Composition and then their function. So let's start with the audit committee. Audit committee. Now, audit committee, first, their composition. Audit committee, their composition. Audit committee, their composition. First, it's made up of what? Directors, both executive and non-executive. But the non-executive should be more. So that's the first point we tell the examiner. It's made up of who? The composition of audit committee. But I think I have to write this one. It's very important. Composition of audit committee. So composition of audit committee, 1, comprised of what? Both executive and non-executive directors. But the non-executive director should be what? More. Should be more than the executive. Good. It should be what? More. So if there are about 5 people on the board, then at least that of non-executive should be more than half. So let's say 3 going, it can be 3, it can be 4, and then we are done. Okay, good. Now, the directors that should be appointed onto the audit committee, there must be a directors that have adequate knowledge in finance and the company's operation. Yes, so not just anybody at all should be part of the audit committee. No. 1, it might be someone that have what? Reasonable knowledge in the finance aspect. Because as an audit committee member, you are going to challenge the quality of the financial report. So if you're not good in finance, you can't challenge you. Come then go and say yes, yes, yes. Whatever you've done is correct. You sign and you go. Well, there's something wrong that you have to query them. Good. So we should have directors that have what? Adequate knowledge in what? Finance. And then the basic laws about the company. So for a bank, for instance, it should be person that have adequate knowledge about what? Finance. Second, directors that are conversant with the banking what? Laws. Not just any one with the finance background. No, you should have the banking laws. The laws, basic laws govern what? The organization. So that's the point number 2. So point number 2. That's what he said. You should have what? Finance. Reasonable knowledge in finance. The directors must comprise of directors who have what? The directors must have reasonable knowledge in finance and basic law of the organization. Then we can also talk about the CEO. Good. The CEO. Good. Now, the CEO and the finance director and then the head of the internal audit unit. Good. Should be invited for meetings. Should be invited. So that's the point 3. The MD The following people should be invited. Yes, invite them to audit committee. Their composition. We are talking about the composition. So if you go and any audit committee, their composition, there's MD there, don't complain. He was invited. Internal audit, finance director. So number 3, the following people must be invited. MD or the CEO. 2, head of internal audit. Head of internal audit. 3, external auditors. Yes. External auditors. So these people must be invited to audit committee meeting. Yes. You have to invite them. Then finally, we have started the composition. Composition. Finally, the audit committee, the head or the chairperson or the chairman of the committee should always strictly be non-executive director. Should be what? Strictly and always non-executive director. So the chairman must be what? Non-executive director. So the chairman must be a non-executive director. How we get that? So chairman must be non-executive director. Sorry, that part is not coming. Chairman must be non-executive director. We are now in the composition of audit committee. Now let's look at the small functions about them, their role. But the role, if you look at it, because all the roles that they perform is in line with the roles performed by the board, because all of them are within the board. So they will take a specific actions of the board. Good. So first, the role of audit committee, number 1, appointment of external auditors. So they recommend the appointment of external auditors. They recommend the appointment of external auditors. So recommendation of what? Appointment of external auditors. That's the role of audit committee. First rule. So if they want to appoint external auditors, it's the audit committee that have to do the recommendation. So it's recommendation though. So you can recommend, shareholders have to approve. How we get it? Good. So number 1, they have to recommend the appointment of external auditors. Good. External auditors. Okay. Then basically, we can also talk about the liaise with the external auditors. Like they liaise with who? The external auditors. For the purpose of what? Maintaining and ensuring audit quality. So they liaise with the external auditors. So they do collaborate with the external auditors to make sure that the audit quality is what? Maintained. So they have to liaise with the external auditors to make sure that audit quality is maintained. Good. And then, okay, so 2, we said that they liaise with the external auditors. Number 3, with the third point here, they review the report of the external auditors. External auditors, they review the report of external auditors on the financial statements. Good. So the audit committee have to review whatever the external auditors are saying, whether the accounts are true and fair view, whether they are fraud, they detected. Good. So that is it. And then they also, number 4, they also review the adequacy of the internal controls. This is what their function. They review and then make sure that review the adequacy of the internal controls. The internal controls and the systems. Adequacy of the internal control and the systems. Good. And then finally, audit committee provide channel or direct channel of communication between the following people. So audit committee provide direct channel of communication between the board, so they provide direct communication, that's the 5th point, between the board and what? The external auditors and the internal audits. So these are the few functions of who? The audit committee. It's very important. Upon all the committees that we have under the board, the 4 committees, the audit committee is the one that they have, for examination purposes, they are the one that most examiners ask. Functions of audit committee, composition of audit committee. Now we are done. We are moving on to the next one. And the next set, we just discussed about them. So we will look at the nomination committee, right? Nomination. And then we have remuneration. Now, as the name suggests, nominate. They nominate members onto what? The company. So they appoint executive directors. So the nomination is done by the nomination committee. So they have to nominate the executive directors. So appointment of finance director must go through the nomination. Good. And purely, it must be non-executive directors, if possible, non-executive directors. Non-executive directors. Then we go to we've talked about their composition and then their role. They nominate, they appoint executive directors. So like finance director, finance manager, chief accountant, those key executive directors, operations, head of operations, head of compliance, those key positions, their appointment is by who? Is by nomination committee. So head of internal audit, it must be by what? Nomination committee. It must be coming from the board. HR cannot appoint head of internal audit. It must come from where? The board. Which side of the board? Board, you have committee. So it must come from nomination committee. They seek to proper composition of the executive management. Good. Then we go to the remuneration committee. Remuneration. They design the compensation packages to the employees or to the executive managers. So executive employees.
So you said the nomination committee, they appoint the HR members.
The nomination committees appoint the executive members. Example, head of internal audit, finance director, head of operations, head of administrations. All these people are appointed by who? Nomination committee. So the question, what are the HR people they're doing? HR. HR, they are responsible to appoint the employees, the workers. Good. So HR is there to employ the workers. Then you go to the remuneration committee. As the name suggests, remuneration. Remuneration. Those that they design the compensation packages. Purely, there must be non-executive directors. In fact, if there's any director who is designing his own salary or pay, he must exclude himself from the meeting. Yes. If you know that the pay that they are going to decide, the decision, you are part, don't go. Yes, you are going to decide on your own salary so that you are going to like inflate it inflate it high at the expense of the company's money. No. Remove yourself from that meeting. If you know that your compensation is part and you're on that board, remove yourself. Don't even go for that meeting. Good. So they are there, they are responsible for what? The remuneration of who? The executive directors. So the head of internal audits, those people that appoint by the nomination, is a remuneration committee that will design their compensation schemes. How we get it? Good. So they design compensation schemes for executive committee. Please, executive committees or executive managers or executive members, they are different from employees. We have ranks, even though all of them are employees, but we have ranks. We have executive members or executive managers or executive management team. There's the head of the units, the head of the units, admin, head, audit, head, finance, head, HR, head, all those head. Good. They should not design their own remuneration. And then finally, we have risk committee. What will be their function? As usual, assessing the risk facing organization, mitigating ways to deal with the risks, and then design the risk appetite of the company. In fact, everything concerning risks, they have to stick to it. Good. Okay. So basically, that is a complete board. You should have all these units over there. Good. Unfortunately for us, this is how far the good Lord will bring us. But if you do have questions, suggestions, kindly let me know. So there's a section that we've not done. So before we go, I think we'll look at that one. That will be the last discussion point. Then we move. Symptoms of poor corporate governance. What are the symptoms of poor corporate governance? It's a very topical issue. So if the corporate governance system in that company is poor, what are the evidence? So symptoms of poor corporate governance. Let's quickly discuss that one and let's see. So the symptoms of poor corporate governance. Number one, the first symptom, which is very dangerous, is that the bodies or the company itself is dominated by single individual. If you see any company which is dominated by single individual, one person, When he says something, nobody challenge. He know everything about the company in the act. He know everybody history, everything about the company, everything about the companies, everything about the company. So domination by single individual. Good. So this one, it normally happen if the CEO and then it is same as who? The chairperson of the board. So that means the entire company is dominated by a single individual. He head the board, also head executive. So he can command on the board section and still command at what? The executive section. So you dominate. When he say yes, nobody can say no, even if it's wrong. Good. Then let's jot it down. Good. So we'll talk about domination by single individual. It's a sign of poor corporate governance. If one person controlling everything, both the board section, the management section, it's a sign of what? Poor corporate governance. Number two, lack of involvement. Lack of involvement. Lack of involvement. Now, with this one, yeah, everybody must partake in decision making. So, the board must meet. The board must what? Meet often, and everybody must partake in it. No, they are different. These 2 points are different. The first one is domination by single individual. One person taking in charge. Here, the involvement of the board, lack of involvement of the board, not by individuals, no. Involvement of the board. Yes, the board. The board must involve, like challenge the executive managers. Good. So the board must involve in the running. Sometimes, no, some of the board, it's just there. They call themselves board of directors. But making decisions becomes an issue. They don't involve themselves in the company. You call them Mantim and Kebi. Yes. The board should be involved, both collective decision. So meeting often. Yes. Meeting often. Now you can also irregular meetings. That is the involvement. Good. Then the third point will be lack of supervision. We said the board supervise the executive managers. So number 3, lack of supervision. Lack of supervision. Then lack of adequate controls. Lack of what? Adequate controls or control function. Lack of adequate control can also be a symptom of what? Poor corporate governance. And then you can also talk about lack of independent Scrutiny. Yes, scrutiny is different from supervision. Supervision is where the board supervising who? Executive managers. Scrutiny is a topical point. Let me change the first point and put it there. Lack of what? Scrutiny. What are we talking about? This one is who watches the watchman. The board itself, they have to scrutinize them. Yes, check their salaries, check their board fees, and see whether it's reasonable. It equates to what? Their work. Good. So that's the independent scrutiny. So you can say that point number 4, lack of independent scrutiny. So the chief executive officer, yes, the chief executive officer and other key staff has to be questioning or answer necessary questions posed by the external auditors. Posed by the external auditors. Good. Then point number 4, point number 5, lack of contact with shareholders. Lack of contact with shareholders. You don't contact the shareholders. You don't take decisions or instructions from shareholders. You meet on your own. No involvement of shareholders. No. It's a poor corporate governance practice. Yes, because you are trading with the shareholders' money. Good. So it's a lack of contact with shareholders. Good. Then number 6 and 7. I'll give 7, then we are done. Because you know a lot of points. 6. Here we talk about emphasize on short-term profitability.
Yes, it's so.
Hmm?
So the company is when the company is dominated by a single individual,
Yeah.
lack of involvement,
Mhm.
lack of supervision,
Mhm.
lack of adequate control, lack of independent scrutiny, lack of contact with shareholders.
So we can talk about emphasis on short-term profitability. Short-term. Short-term profitability. Short-term profitability. You know, any company that is focusing on short-term profit, there's a sign of what? Poor corporate governance. We have to look for the long term. Short term means they are chasing the interest of the directors, not the interest of the shareholders, because the shareholders have a long term benefit, or their interest, they're interested in a long term profitability, not the short term. But you know the directors, for them, they will not build the company for long because they are there for a short while. Some of them 4 years. They will reappoint again. They will go 4 years. So it's not the 4 years that I'm coming to make the company profitable in the long run. No. When I come, I'm coming for my position, my interest. No. But whenever you do this, it's a sign of what? Poor corporate governance practices. Good. Then let's look at the finally. Misleading and account information. Publishing misleading accounts and information. Misleading of what? Account. That's the point 8. Leading of account. Accounts. That's the annual report, the financial statements, and other. And what? Information. You are publishing lies on your website that you have achieved this award. Go and take a picture somewhere and say that this is the award that you've achieved. 6 of them, 7 of them. No, you have achieved only 3. You are publishing what? False information. All of them amount to poor corporate governance practices. Good. Then we can scan through these sections, these questions. Okay, so the first section is the section 58 and then section 60 of the Banks and Special Deposit Taking Act institution. I think this one we discussed about it the other time. Good. And it explain the fiduciary duties of directors. We also explain about this enshrined in the Companies Act. These two has been indicated. Yes, we discussed about it the other time in it. So in fact, all of them are in the material. The first two, they are in there. Those are not in, I'll let you know. Then the third one is the role and responsibility of who? The internal audit department in corporate governance system of banking institution. Go. So the role of internal audit, they are the one that we discussed. Here relating to banking. So if you're citing any example, it must come from where? Banking section. Good. Corporate governance issues in the annual audit report of a bank. Okay. As one. Functions of the board audit committee of financial institution. Look at that. The composition of an audit committee in a good corporate governance. What are the symptoms of poor corporate governance in a financial institution? Yes, all this will still work there. Good. So on that note, we call it a successful meeting. In fact, we've end exactly 9:15 on the dot. Our time.